All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our May Garden Talk. Today we're going to have Connie Boyd talk about no-mow yards, which seems pretty appropriate for this time of year. Thank you, Connie.
You're welcome, and thank you everyone for your patience and willingness to accept a substitute for today's presentation. When I talk about no-mow yards, I'm specifically targeting front yards. And primarily because if you have a backyard and you want to turn it all into a garden, there's a lot more privacy involved with a backyard. You can do what you want. But I think people are a little more hesitant to get rid of a lawn in the front because it's much more public. It's viewed by neighbors and passerby. So I think there's a little more trepidation, but I certainly want to encourage you to consider it. And one of the reasons is because it just is beautiful, but there's many other reasons that I think going into more garden than lawn is good. And there are a number of reasons or theories behind why lawns have become just such a mainstay in the United States for homeowners. A lot of different theories. I just want to share some of them with you today. One is called the Savannah syndrome. And this one says, we can't help it. We're wired to want a big lawn. And it's because we're going back years and years in our DNA when it was a hunter-gatherer society. And if you were a hunter having low grass or savanna plains, you could see your prey. So it was more of a potential for survival. And so some theorists would say that it's just wired into us and that's what we want. But it goes back to years and years and years ago. One of the other theories is that it shows how wealthy you are. And this was a movement that many call the landscape movement. It occurred in the 1700s in England. That's where it started. But if you lived even in the States in the 1700s and you were lucky enough to own land, your land had to be productive, whether it was for grazing of livestock or growing food. And maybe you grew food to trade or barter, or maybe you grew it just for your own family, but you couldn't have land sit idle. That was just would be wasteful. You couldn't do it. And so the wealthy realized that they could just have land that looked pretty. And it was a very visual sign of the amount of money they had because their land didn't have to do anything but look nice. The thing that's interesting, though, is through the landscape movement, two of the main movers and shakers of the landscape movement in terms of landscape architecture were William Kent and Capability Brown. And these are some examples of their landscapes, like a painting. They looked like paintings, but those were all man-made, so to speak. They would take down hills where hills were and put hills in where they wanted them. They wanted this rolling effect. They would put in lakes and ponds. They would move mature trees. So this is anything but how it once looked. Nature didn't do this. These gentlemen did this. And it became such a popular movement, it came to the States. And in the States, two main people that you may be familiar with, Frank J. Scott and Frederick Law Olmsted. And they really helped promote this landscape movement in the United States. Another theory is that a lawn is easy to understand, not easy to grow and maintain, but easy to understand. That the more things become complex, the more anxious we become. It makes us unhappy. And so a lawn is easy. It's a one-trick pony. It's one thing. But any of you who have attempted to grow a lawn knows it's anything but easy and anything but low maintenance. Another theory says we need to be in control. And we know nature could care less if we want to be in control, but we know how much work people put into lawns to eradicate that one little weed or flower that wants to come up. So again, it's talking to our nature to always be the one managing and making the rules. Two other things that occurred in the States that really promoted the idea of lawns, which you may think are unusual. are cemeteries and golf. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, the rural cemetery movement really came into being. Prior, cemeteries would be graveyards attached to a church, might be in an urban area, and really landscaping was almost impossible. But as cemeteries moved into more rural areas with more land, they became a spot to have this kind of rolling lawn that gave a sense of serenity and peace, and actually became some of the first parks. These cemeteries came into being before public parks. And Victorians did not think it was sacrilegious to have a picnic lunch on a Sunday on their relative's grave. It was a way to show respect and be with them. Not unusual for sleigh rides through in the winter, picnics in the summer. So cemeteries were used almost as a recreational park zone and wasn't seen as unusual or inappropriate in any way. The picture on the left actually is a historic Batavia cemetery here in Batavia. And again, a lot of the scape is beautiful with the mature trees, but this grass that's far from perfect, which is why I didn't take a close-up of it for you. Now, golf also was something that came to the States. First golf course that came to the States was in 1888. And what was used primarily were cow pastures that were converted into greens. And so the first course established in 1888, by 1902, there were over 1,000 golf courses in the United States. So the popularity of the sport really also promoted these kind of green spaces that became, again, less space for the cows, more for the golfers. And another theory that is said to have really promoted lawns as being popular was the idea of the good life. After World War II, there was a bit more prosperity, and a way to show that was to have a nice house and a lawn, and planned communities or suburbs began to crop up. The very first one in the States was called Levittown. And there were a number of rules that went along with living in Levittown. You needed to have a lawn. You couldn't have a fence. You could have a tree and some foundation shrubs, but that was about it. And you had a mowing schedule. You were not going to disturb your neighbors by mowing whenever you wanted to. You got a schedule of when you could mow. And if anybody has lived in a gated community or a planned community that might have an HOA, those kind of rules still exist to this day. And it always makes me think of my late mother-in-law, who was a horticulturist. And when she moved into kind of a planned community, she wanted to plant tomatoes, and her front yard was the most ideal for the sun. But they said, no, 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 no tomatoes in a front yard. You don't grow vegetables in the front of the house. So she was very disappointed. But again, that still exists because the HOA is looking for a certain look, and everything must conform to that look. So what are the problems? It's popular, but what are the problems with having a lawn and just lots of lawn? Well, most of the grasses, and Jan might be able to tell me if they've reorchestrated grasses and mixes that are more native. She says, no, not really. So most of the grasses that were used to grow lawns were not native to the area. They were coming in from Africa, Asia, Europe, and they really didn't want to grow here. They weren't really adapted to our conditions and to our climates, and yet we kind of forced them to grow here. And also, just like a farmer that would grow a single crop, it's a monoculture. And it's prone to problems if you get a disease or a pest. If you're growing just one thing, it can be totally decimated. Where when we grow, most farmers will either change out a crop to a field, or they'll grow multiple different types of crops that can help cut down on disease spread and pest infestation. So again, the lawn is just asking to have problems for you. The other thing is that there really is a high cost in maintenance of a lawn. Now, if you let it die out, that might be different. But if you're really trying to keep a green lawn that looks lush, there's a lot of cost involved. And if we break down the costs, we're looking at things like chemicals and water and labor. So all those contribute to just creating more cost for you that can be very expensive. If we look at chemicals, I don't know if anybody sees these signs around. They always distress me because I know little children and my squirrels can't read these signs. They're just not equipped to. And so again, all the ownership is on somebody who either does the application or the person that lives, that's having this lawn maintenance done. So again, it can be harmful if you walk through it. The person on the left, kudos to them, at least they're wearing protective equipment. You hope they're using the pesticide correctly. But I bet some of you don't have to answer me. Maybe it's just me, but I certainly know people that say, oh, a tablespoon, I'll use a whole cup. It's got to work better if I use more, right? Let's just use the whole bottle. So if you're not reading the instructions correctly and following them to the T and protecting yourself, it's not just the environment that can have potential damage, but you can damage yourself in terms of breathing this or touching these chemicals. It also is a concern in that even if it dries, it still will be clinging to things. So if you have wildlife in your yard, they come and they eat berries off a bush or ingest grass, again, potential danger to them. And also runoff that can occur. I found a fact that said, and it's probably even more now, in the US, we spend over 30 billion a year on lawn care, just on lawn care. And in terms of chemicals, we use 70 million pounds of pesticides a year just on lawns. So, yowza, that I think is a concern. One of the other concerns with chemicals too is not just being ingested by wildlife, but there is potential for runoff. If you have rain or heavy rains, and that type of thing then could end up contaminating streams and rivers and ponds. So again, you want to be very cautious, but sometimes it's very hard to maintain a lawn without chemical use of some type. If we're looking at water, US lawns consume nearly 3 trillion gallons of water a year. And turf grass is the biggest irrigated crop in the United States. And we do know if you don't water a lawn, it goes dormant or it dies. It's not very pretty. And also it's a monoculture. It doesn't do very much for wildlife, even if you're maintaining it. So definitely a concern. And if you start to see the temperature changes that are even occurring in our area with climate change, or the drought conditions, certainly last year there was drought in the area, and grass may not be real happy about drought. And you may have a water ban. A number of communities in drought conditions want to maintain drinking water, so they're going to ban you watering your lawn. And unless you're a renegade and you go out in the middle of the night in the dark with your hose, you're going to end up with your lawn being super thirsty and dying on you. And labor. Some people have told me they like mowing lawns. It's real zen. It's never been something that's appealed to me at all, but some people like it. But we spend at least 70 hours each year just mowing. And then most people like this have a gas mower, and gas-powered mowers in the US use 200 million gallons of gas a year. Yeah. Let's not even think about the gasoline uses. Let's think of the noise pollution. Let's think of the air pollution that comes with gas-powered mowers. I don't know. I don't own a mower anymore, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people like to go and buy the biggest and the best. And usually that means the loudest that's coming into play. And it's not just mowers. We're talking weed whackers, leaf blowers, all those things we use to maintain that lawn. Lawn mowers emit 82 to 90 decibels of noise, weed whackers 96. Anything over 85 can lead to potential loss of hearing. And I rarely see people with mowers, unless they're riding mowers, wearing any protective ear coverings. So again, there's that potential you're causing a hearing loss just by maintaining your lawn through mowing. And if we look at air pollution, the EPA estimates that hour-to-hour gas-powered mowers produce 11 times as much pollution as a new car. I'd personally rather have the new car, if given a choice. So I think those are a lot of reasons that may say, oh, maybe I want to reduce my lawn a little bit or not have as much just turf grass growing. And what are the other benefits? Well, remember that monoculture. By having plants, different things growing, you really create more biodiversity, and that creates an environment where beneficial insects, pollinators, wildlife can thrive. And these happen to be from my front yard, so I have to feature my little bees and butterflies. Some more benefits to reducing your lawn. Hopefully, if you plant the right plant, as Jan always says, our guru, we go to our guru, plant the right plant in the right place. If you choose wisely in terms of what you're planting and companion planting, you could really reduce your use of chemicals. I know I don't use any chemicals in my garden. If you're growing things again that are suited to our climate and to your particular yard in terms of sun and shade, you may reduce the amount of water you have to use to maintain it. Hopefully that also means less maintenance and labor, less personal expense altogether, and hopefully more free time. I know I just sit and look at my front yard while other people are mowing all weekend. So I see it as a real benefit. Let's say I've convinced you to at least consider pulling up a little grass, maybe along the sidewalk, right? Near the foundation, maybe around a tree, broadening out the garden area. How do I start? Well, I would always recommend checking local laws and zoning, because some places are very stringent about what you can have in a front yard, like my mother-in-law who couldn't grow her tomatoes. Also, I know in Batavia, it pertains just to growing grass. It can only be so many feet high before you get fined and you have to mow it. They're fine about flowers, though, at any height. I have had zoning come and visit me and say, I know, it's a garden. I know. But it helps to check. I wouldn't discourage you if they say this is the law to not consider still doing it, but it means you're going to have to negotiate to have that done. But certainly know what you're up against before you start something so you don't have to then step back and pull it all out. So just checking with local laws and zoning. Utility companies also are very great about coming out and marking water, gas lines. They do it for free. And that's before you put a shovel in the ground anywhere. I appreciated knowing just where those were, so I didn't have an emergency on my hands. The other thing is, as you would do in planting anything, what direction does my yard face? Do I get a lot of sun? Is it more shady? Knowing those circumstances, knowing what the pH of your soil is, all the things that you do before you put any plant in the ground is the same thing you're going to want to do if you start pulling up your lawn to turn it into a garden area. It just means doing that homework first, so you're planting things that are going to thrive for you rather than fighting them. It's just like I always wanted blue hydrangeas. I plant them and they turn a pretty shade of pink all the time. And I've accepted now they want to be pink because I'm never going to change the pH of my soil on a permanent basis. And it's too much heartache. So I've learned to embrace pink hydrangeas. So it's just be, accept what you have. You can modify it a bit, but don't create more heartache for yourselves. And if you're scared about ripping out the whole lawn, then just start small. And some of the ways you can do that is dwarf varieties of plants or look at ground cover. Although if you're going to do ground cover, you still want to do a variety of ground covers, or you're going to end up with a monoculture again. So you want to look at some. Now, when I first did this program a few years back, I had a couple of ground covers in that almost caused Jan to have a heart attack. So I've changed those slides a bit just to say, don't plant these. And I can speak personally from problems I've had planting these. Things like periwinkle. You can find it everywhere. It's pretty, it flowers, it tolerates all types of conditions, but it's not native and it can be incredibly invasive. And I found I planted it at one time and thought it was pretty, and now it tries to choke every rose bush I own. And every spring, that is my nemesis. And I go ripping it out by the roots and cackling, and it grows right back. So just one that you may want to avoid because of the fact that it's not native and that it can really be a thug in your garden. The other one that I'm now saying avoid because of Jan's guidance is Pachysandra. The same way, it tolerates shade, it tolerates a lot of conditions, it flowers, but again, it's not native and it can really take over an area. Now, you may think this is kind of a weed. Some people think it is if it crops up, but violets are beautiful and they're native and they really will fill in areas. Even if you keep a lawn, it will feed through the lawn. And again, something that is native, so it's really going to be of more benefit. Anybody grow violets? I love them. I think they're very pretty. So one possibility, and again, they grow fairly easily. Wild strawberry is another native, and again, it will fill in very nicely. And I believe Jan can correct me, it will take sun and part shade. It will tolerate different types of soil fairly well. This next photo is a golden groundsel or golden ragwort, also a native ground cover that's not going to grow super tall. And I believe it'll take part shade and shade. I think it likes the soil a little better. It doesn't want dry soil. But again, how pretty is that? A lot prettier than turf grass. To me, anyway. And this slide got out of sync, so I apologize. I thought I had changed it. It jumped back. Yeah. Magic. This is actually, is this the this is from your yard?
Yep.
So this so that's the wild strawberry, and
it's actually filled in a lot.
And I have that picture to show that it filled in very quickly. So this is a wild strawberry that Jan planted in her yard. And look at this among the spring flowers. So it's filled in beautifully, and it's also going to flower. So it's very pretty, and it's certainly beneficial to wildlife. And this, I believe, is here in the grounds. And so it just shows some other natives that you can consider. You have wild geranium here. There's foam flower, the golden groundsel or ragwort. And then if you like grasses, Pennsylvania sedge is a native. So you could end up with a native grass. And those, I think, spread very easily.
Yeah, and if you're here in person, you can actually check it on the way out because that golden groundsel went crazy last year and is really filling in, which is what we wanted it to do. And another plus to that one is the leaves stay evergreen. So it's an evergreen ground cover.
So pretty. And the thing is, the more it fills in, the less things are going to be able to pop up that you feel are undesirable. So hopefully that's less weeding involved once it fills in. Now, one that is not native, but I love, and Jan can yell at me if she wants, because I put it in here, is thyme. I grow a lot of thyme because it really deals with poor soil, and it flowers and the bees love it. They're always on it. I will even grow it in pebbles along my median because it takes hold and it goes through the winter. I'm shocked, but it's always there when the snow melts. So just something to consider, even though it's not native, it has benefits to it. And I like that it doesn't need a lot of care, really doesn't. Another one you might think of as a weed, but white clover. I love white clover. It smells pretty. The bees love it. It's a nitrogen fixer. It grows quickly, and just like any ground cover, it comes to a certain height, and that's it. So you don't have to mow it. And anything where you don't have to mow, I'm excited. Well, let's say you're thinking, I don't want to just do ground covers. How boring is that? So to you people after my own heart, I say, go wild, go wild. These are two pictures from Buffalo Garden Walk. And this woman on the left, I bow to her every time I visit her house on Garden Walk, because this is always what I aspired to. It's not just her front yard, it's her median, it's her entire backyard. And, there's not all natives here, but there are a lot that are more native. You've got the coneflowers, both of these houses, there's Russian sage, there's black-eyed Susans, there's phlox, and it's just a wonderful mix of plants. And both of these houses, you walk by them and you can hear the bees buzzing in the summer. It's quite lovely. A couple more examples of things you can do if you've eliminated the lawn. Picture on the right, again, you can see some ground cover growing along the walkway, but then you've got, it looks like lady's mantle, you've got lilies, so there's some shrubs, and on the left, again, the lilies, it looks like maybe cranesbill, black-eyed Susans, oriental lilies, so, and some hydrangeas. They have blue hydrangeas. I'm very jealous, but it must work for them with their yard. But again, you can have a very small footprint of a yard and still have this very lush, diverse, colorful garden right in your front yard. And you may say, why did you focus on this program? Why did you decide you wanted to do this program? Because this was what I had, and I hated it. This is the artist rendition of my house when I bought my house over 30 years ago. It doesn't show that there's houses very close next to it. I love how artists make believe you're on an island by yourself. The picture on the left I put in because I have very few pictures of the front yard before we started digging it apart. So this is a picture of my daughter standing in the front yard. You can see the very overgrown shrubs. And she's now in her early 30s. So this was a long time ago. But I just hated the shrubs were ice damaged. They had never been really cared for. They were, getting spindly at the bottom. They weren't pretty. I didn't like them. The tree was great, a mock cherry. I liked the tree was great. The rest of it, I wanted it gone. And luckily my salvation came in a sewer line break, which you may not see a positive spin. It's the only positive thing I could see about the sewer line break, but the sewer line broke to the road. And so the whole front yard had to be backhoed out to replace the sewer line. And luckily the plumber salvaged my tree, but the whole lawn was gone. And at that point, it was like, okay, why put that back? Let's just start with something else. So that really helped create a circumstance that allowed me to start the project. We also had been to England. The family had gone to England, and everywhere there, every front yard is bursting with flowers. And it's like they have very little lawn and they have very small yards like I do. So it's just like, well, I have a choice. I can have a lawn and a little border of flowers, or I can have all flowers. And I decided all flowers was where I wanted to go. So those are all the rationales and the reasons why we started this transformation. So where we are, this is actually from a couple years ago when I first did this program. So this is kind of where we are now, and there's been some more evolution because of the drought conditions. But you can see a lot of coneflowers in the sunny areas. I have a lot of roses, lamb's ear, foxglove closer to the tree. These actually are brown-eyed Susans, more of a native. They're very small and little round petals, and they crop up everywhere, and they just want to grow, and I let them. I do fill in with some pots if I want additional color or something different, an annual to grow. Lavender that's been there at least 25 years. So things have endured and they've survived. And my neighbors have been very gracious about it. I've only had one move. I think he really couldn't. In fact, when I was ripping out the arborvitae in front of the house, I had to bear hug it to get it out. So I'd grab it and I'd toss myself to the ground until I could rip its roots. And my neighbor did come over and say, "What you doing, Connie?" I'm tearing out the bushes, and yeah, he moved shortly afterwards. I really think I upset him. But other than that, the neighbors have been very gracious, and they've been slowly extending their borders, planting more and more flowers in their front yard. Again, this is the picture on the left, it's much sunnier. And so I do get a lot of bee balm and the cone flowers, and there is a rose on the corner. The one on the right is closer to the house, so more shaded. So I do have hydrangeas. The autumn joy sedum gets more sun right where it's positioned, so it does really well. And again, I filled in with coleus just to add some color. So I just have a variety of things. I want more, but I can only fit so much. But I've enjoyed just watching it evolve over time. This is just another picture from the front. You can see that the median also is planted. And so the median has coreopus, it has sedge, it has lamb's ear, it has brown-eyed Susans, it has coneflowers. And you can see along the sidewalk closer to the house, the lamb's ear kind of took over, but there's a lot of roses. I've lined with roses. I have to admit, one reason is because I love dogs and I love dog walkers. I'm not so thrilled when dogs potty in my yard. A row of roses really detours that activity big time because of the thorns and just the fill in. So that's why the whole front is lined with roses. Again, just showing other angles with the lavender and blossom. On the left picture, lower right, you can see the honesty plant that's drying because I collect seeds from everything. And again, just gives you a different angle, but it's kind of frothy, overflowing. I call it hysterical gardening. I guess it might classify as cottage gardening, but I allow if something starts growing and I like it, I let it go until I can't handle it anymore, and then I edit it. But for the most part, if it wants to grow, go for it. It's okay. The one exception is we have a lot of Queen Anne's lace, and my husband's favorite spring activity is ripping it all out. He sits there for hours pulling out the Queen Anne's lace that took over the yard. It gives him a purpose, so it's a good thing. This just is a picture closer to the tree, just to show again, growing lady's mantle, hosta, daylilies, and some foxglove, and they do really well under the tree. This is how it looked last summer. So you can see that again, because of the dryness, the brown-eyed Susans took over. Look at that median. There are other plants there. Good luck trying to see them. The brown-eyed Susans really loved it. And you can see in the right side picture, I do have common milkweed, which I know can take over, but I love having it there because I have the monarchs come in. So I let that grow there. We even have had some additional phlox pop up in a different color, which I don't know how, but I was quite excited and I let them grow. I can tell you, and I think Jan is aware, the city put in new gas lines down the property last year. And so that entire medium had to be dug up and replanted. So we'll see what survived. I had 12 plus planters down the driveway where I dug everything. And kudos to the crew for being so nice about digging where I asked them to dig rather than taking out my roses. And we ended up with a new sidewalk too, because they dug in that area. But it was slightly distressing and caused a few tears, but they were nice and we bought them donuts, so it was all okay. And again, just another angle from last year, just showing that we still had the roses doing really well. We even grow datura, so there is on the right near the black wrought iron, there is a datura that sprouted up. We tend to grow those in pots, but if they grow in the yard and they're happy, we let them grow. So again, it's not something everybody likes, but it's something we love. And the reason why is because we have all these little visitors that come and we just love seeing the activity in the yard. So that's my program. Thank you for your attention. Bibliography, some great resources. Can I go next slide? Spring Garden Gala. And you can call Gordon if you have a question. And just that we're non-discriminatory. Welcome everyone.
Our statement. Does anybody have questions for Connie? I love this program just because it's so happy.
It is happy.
It's happy. It makes you happy. So that's what gardeners should do. Thank you, Connie. This is a
Thank
wonderful
you.
program. Let's thank Connie today. So,
Thank you.
and we will be back in June with a terrarium demonstration. So if you need to sign up for that, you can go to our website for the Zoom link, or you can give our office a call and sign up for in person. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us today.